I,
There you should
I
hear
can
me.
hear you now.
okay,
I can
can
hear
you
you
hear us
now.
now?
Hear us now?
Teddy, is it the
Yeah.
Texas Tech team that lost in the finals last year?
No, no, no. 2 years ago, the team that I think they actually beat Duke, if I remember right, but the team that lost in the
Wait,
Elite
just
Eight
you
two
unplugged
years
us.
ago. That's the
We
team
lost all
we
sound.
beat 2 years ago.
I lost all
Crazy.
sound.
Cliff unplugged
You
something.
can't hear me anymore. I can hear you.
No, I hear nothing. You hear nothing?
No, we can't hear him.
I can hear you guys.
Yeah, there's no audio.
Yeah, I think he pulled something. Nothing. There you
Yeah,
go.
Teddy.
Teddy there?
I can hear you guys. Yep.
I'm
Okay.
going to
Alright,
mute
yeah,
that
he's back,
one
Cliff.
unless you just want to go live right now.
All right, Teddy.
Why?
Why are you muting him?
Just because I was gonna put you on a placeholder.
Yeah. Teddy.
He can't hear us.
Yep. I can hear you now.
Oh,
I can see
he
the
hears us now.
I can hear you now. I can see like beyond the game on the screen and what looked like the intro to the show.
Okay, cool.
What?
This camera, I kind of readjusted it was off.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. Are you doing multi-views with them? In boxes? You're doing multi-views, right?
I wasn't going to, but I can.
And Cliff, I just can't see anything on the screen either.
We lost it.
It's gone.
Yeah, you won't need it. You can do it off of your screen.
Because you'll see what you're
You'll see
putting out.
what you'll see on your screen. And Frank will see what you see on your screen. So you don't have to have that. You just have to be able to see your pictures on there. You know what I'm saying?
Cliff, I would go without a multi-view to avoid these issues.
Okay. So for tonight, don't go multi-view.
Okay.
Okay. Next time we do remote, though, I want to go multi-view.
I'll try to mess with it on the fly, but
Yeah, if it's going to cause a problem, don't do it.
okay.
And we'll make sure we do it for the next. We have to get it done for the next show. I want to do multi-views, framed and everything.
Okay.
So there's no way of getting a visual on that screen?
No, do you need it?
Yeah, I think I might be a little confused if,
How come?
I don't know, it's like, just what I'm used to, I guess. And, you know, if I'm trying to, I don't know. But like, what happened? It was just there.
We lost it. And you can't get it back. We don't have screens either.
Yeah, I don't have anything on mine. I only see the BYG feed.
Are you sure it's not up in the full screen area? Something defaulted? Did you check?
It's because something when you didn't have to unplug it, but if you pull something and it wiggles in the port and it like unattaches for even a second, it defaults the display setting. They're plugged in right now, but I won't be able to reset the default display settings unless I restart.
Right. So you can't give him anything. Yeah. So you won't have it.
Alright.
Just look off of your monitor. You'll be fine.
Yeah, it's fine. We should get going. This thing just said low battery. This earpiece.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, just said low battery.
Okay. I'll set him up with headsets.
Should we? How long do you think I have left on this thing?
Not enough that I feel comfortable.
Yeah, it might be
I'm
this
really
long.
mad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Teddy, we're gonna go live in like a couple minutes.
Cool. Sounds good.
That's cool. next episode of Beyond the Game. We got a special guest, a good friend, an old college teammate. Teddy Rawlings is on the air. He's all the way down in Texas. Teddy, how you feeling tonight, my man?
I'm doing great, Corey. Thanks for having me, man.
You're very welcome. It's a pleasure to have you. Highly anticipated episode because, Coach Wink, he thinks the world of you. And I feel as though when we're in like business meetings and we're talking to different people and we're, just shooting the shit sometimes, I feel like your name comes up a lot just because of, the impression you had on my dad and obviously me growing up, going through school in Philly, you being a Philly area guy, I just feel as though you come up a lot. So it's good to kind of reconnect here on a pretty cool setting.
Yeah, man, this is an awesome setting. It's good. I hope those are good reasons or good things that they're coming up for. um, but hopefully they are, or I'm sure that they are. And it's been great, maintaining our relationship after college, and our experience together playing lacrosse was awesome. And to see the way this has grown is tremendous, man. So I'm really excited to be on this tonight.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Teddy. And it's funny, we say the same thing about as we kind of like sit behind the scenes. I think the best way I've been able to follow just kind of you and what you've been a part of is through social media and through the media. And my dad and I have always said it. We know that one day you're gonna be coaching on a big stage. It's starting to happen already. But where you are today and how you've gotten there, I know it's been, I'm sure for you, a pretty interesting path. It's one that I don't think just anyone can do. I think it's something that takes a lot of perseverance and passion and energy. So if you don't mind, just take people that are watching the show tonight, or people that will be watching later, through how you ended up where you are today. Talk about what you're doing today, what your role is, your responsibilities, and how you kind of got there in a couple minutes.
Sure. I'm currently coaching as an assistant basketball coach at Texas A&M University Commerce, Division II school, about an hour southeast of Dallas, Texas. And, you mentioned perseverance and work ethic. All those things certainly matter to getting anywhere in life. I don't think just in sports, but sports has that unique financial constraint on the front end of your career that really makes you have to survive with some perseverance. But the thing that I always go back to anytime I'm on anything like this or just having conversations is I got through, or I am where I am now because of an incredible support system. And, you read a lot of books that are like the 5 most influential people in your life, or the people you spend the most amount of time with, and they're going to dictate kind of where your life goes. And for me, I've had way more than 5 people in my life. Every stop I've gone has significantly impacted my path and why I am where I am now. So everybody who didn't get to read any kind of bio, obviously you and I played lacrosse together at Penn, and our junior year we went through a coaching change, and that the man who took over the program, his name Mike Murphy, obviously still there. He's probably played the biggest role in my college sports career. He got me my first basketball job at Haverford College, where he had coached before he came to Penn. And then he also hired me as a director of lacrosse operations, as a position he created. And that enabled me to kind of survive the challenges of the financial constraints of Division III basketball. And it gave me an ops experience that eventually allowed me to become a Division I basketball operations, basically the position called the director of basketball operations. And in between there, I coached at a school called University of the Sciences in Philadelphia. And that coach's name is Dave Pauly. And he gave me the basketball education that I really needed. And I take that everywhere I go. And from there, I went up to Brown University, worked for a guy named Mike Martin, who'd been an assistant basketball coach at Penn while I was there. And I was a manager there at Penn. That was that connection. And Mike has always really, really been sure to take care of me and help me survive this career and kind of move up the ladder a little bit. And then from there, I went to George Mason as the director of basketball operations, and had a couple funny connections that we can dive into later about how that was able to happen. And now I work again at Texas A&M Commerce, Division II school in Dallas. And I happen to work for somebody who's one of my best friends, this guy, Jarrett von Rosenberg. I met 10 years ago working elite camps at the University of Pennsylvania. And 10 years later, I'm working for him now and really excited to be a part of what I think is a national championship program.
Teddy, you talked about having like at least 5 people or so in your corner that kind of direct and steer your path. I guess my question for you, which is something that I think is super important for the younger student athletes as they maybe go through the recruiting process, or a young student athlete that might be going through college to find a job. How do you kind of get those people in your corner? Like, how did you discover some of those people that have been your closest friends, your mentors, people that have guided you? I know you mentioned the man that you coach with, you met at an elite basketball camp, but where else do you kind of find those people and maintain those relationships throughout life?
You know what? That's a really good question. I think that if you can do something where you kind of excel in your role, I think that really can give you a good chance. I think Coach Murphy, again, he's the biggest reason why I have a chance to be where I am now. I was a walk-on goalie at Penn, as you know, and I think I embraced that role and did the best that I possibly could. The way I looked in comparison to the guys that were in front of me, the Chris Caseys, the Greg Murrays, and the Brian Feeneys, and even my counterparts that were younger than me coming up, like Brian was younger, and another guy, Brendan Engelke. All those guys
Teddy,
were better than I was.
Can we pull up a picture real quick of you three and talk
Definitely.
about this? Frank, do you
Sure,
mind
sure,
showing
sure.
just this shot that you sent me? Can you see that one?
I can see that one. Those are my guys. I still talk to them today. That's Brian Feeney on the left, and Brendan Engelke on the right. That's my senior year, or our senior year, you and I. And that was a picture from our goalie day. We started
What is a
the
goalie
year
day?
before.
'Cause I love the concept. I loved it when you started at school, and I think other goalies who are watching this podcast/show need to understand like the mentality of why you created that. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So my sophomore year, Greg Murray he kind of took me under his wing. I was struggling. I came in and, everybody hears about Baker Mayfield and thinks like, oh my God, I can be the walk-on that starts eventually. And you're like, dude, you're not that good. Like, you can work as hard as you want, but you still need a certain level of talent. And that realization kind of hit sophomore year. And Greg took me under his wing. And Greg was a Philly guy, or still obviously is a Philly guy. And him and Chris Casey, our other goalie, had been splitting the duties that year, and made sure I was a part of that. I wasn't just this other guy in practice. And I, since then, have always remembered that and took that junior year. Chris and I did that, and Engelke. And then my senior year, we just kind of made it official, and it ran for like 5 more years. And basically the goalie day happens every single day at practice because it's the most unique position in the game. Because guys are throwing rubber balls at you 100 miles an hour at that level. And if they're not any good, they hit you. So, you kind of bond over that. And then one day a year, we would all get together and just spend that entire day together. And those guys became my best friends in college. And we're still really, really close now. That's basically what we did. And our goal was to do what we're doing, maintain that relationship after school, and finding somebody who knows exactly what you're going through in terms of the day-to-day struggle. We all have our own challenges, but our challenges are unique enough that other people, if you have your eyes open, can kind of understand what you're going through. And Brendan and Brian obviously know what it's like to be a goalie every day. So instead of worrying about trying to compete over them, I just brought them into my circle, and we became really close friends. So that's kind of what that concept was. And it's really cool to see it go on for as long as it did. Hopefully that kind of answers that question. But that's, the original question, though, going back, was how did you find it? Like, I think Coach Murphy knew that I embraced that role, and I was going to be an energy giver in practice. And I was going to make sure I did the little things well. Like, for goalies that are out there, we have, when I was playing, you had 10 seconds to go over the midline and 10 seconds to get it into the box. And in practice, when we were clearing, I always made sure our defense knew mentally, like, I was calling out if we were 7, 8, 9 seconds left before we had to get it over. And Murph always appreciated that. I mean, he stopped practice here and there to comment on that. And I didn't show up late for things. I tried to be the first person in the locker room, because when you're a walk-on, those are the things you have to do. And because you're embracing that role, you're turning your boss's head. When you're 55 people on a roster, that's hard to do. But that's kind of how I approached it. And everywhere I've been, that's kind of how I've tried to do it. It was a good lesson to learn at 20, 21, and 22, and something I try to remind myself of every day.
Can you maybe bring up an example of, when you've been working somewhere else after college, where you're doing the little things, you're doing your job, you're not doing it maybe necessarily because you want the credit or the accolades. Like, you're doing it because you understand that there's a goal that your staff has as a unit, or something that you're trying to accomplish as a team. There's a process in place, and in return, or as a result of what you're doing, all these little things, like, you get recognized, whether it be at Mason or where you are currently, or maybe when you were at Brown. If you can maybe talk about that, that'd be great.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think the fact that I haven't spent more than 3 years on any single staff. And a big part of that has been because of the work I've done. It's led to the next job. It's led to my bosses feeling comfortable calling other people and saying, this is somebody that you've got to hire. Leaving Brown for George Mason, that's leaving the Ivy League for the Atlantic 10, and then leaving the Dobo position to be an assistant at a top 20 Division II school. That's a lot of people in the basketball world could perceive that as a step up. So being able to do those jobs really well has allowed that to happen. The ops job in whether it's lacrosse, football, basketball, or any other sport that's funded enough to have it, that's what that whole position's about. I mean, you're booking flights, you're booking hotels, you're booking buses, you're making sure people are where they need to be on time. If something goes wrong, you're the scapegoat no matter what. And depending on, even if you're in the Ivy League, there's going to be kids that aren't A students, and it's on you to know about that and make sure that those guys are staying on top of their books. And if they aren't, the ops guy is typically the person that hears it. And as you go up the chain and you're working in the Atlantic 10, you've got more and more administrators that you're working with, and you have to have those positive relationships. And nobody sees any of that in a box score. But if that stuff's not going well, for each conversation your head coach has to have with an administrator because you can't figure out how to solve that problem. Well, if it's in season, you're taken away from game prep. And if it's out of season, you're taken away from recruiting. I mean, the recruiting never stops. And even in season, in a lot of ways, you're taken away from more than just scouting. You're still also taken away from recruiting and managing your team and managing your players. And really good ops guys find a way to just keep their head coaches' plates empty from all of that stuff. And it's hard to find that recognition, and it typically goes unrecognized. But if you're moving up the ladder, that's its own recognition. That's something I've learned. And again, I try to remind myself when I was in those positions, and the skills you get from them as well, they help you succeed in your next jobs, and whether you stay in sports or make a career change.
I think, Teddy, one of the most interesting things, but also one of the things I admire most about kind of like your path is, dealing with jobs that maybe necessarily you don't want to do, but have to be done in order to achieve your goals, is something that I think, in order to do for a short period of time is hard, but let alone do it for multiple years, for potentially a decade. And I feel as though you spent a lot of time doing some of those roles, but I'm sure deep down, like, your passion is coaching. And there's one picture, if you don't mind, Frank, I want to pull up of someone that you coach with. Can you just talk about your relationship here, and talk about now how you're kind of transforming into someone who is going from being able to do all the things that help run a team, a basketball program, a lacrosse program, a college program, to now learning the ins and outs of coaching, managing players, game planning, recruiting, and all those things. And I just thought this was a really, really cool picture. I just wanted to maybe talk about who was in it and, what the scene was here.
Yeah, definitely. That guy right there, his name's Dwayne Simpkins. He was McDonald's All-American coming out of high school, played at DeMatha Catholic, and then he played at Maryland. And the DMV, often people thought he was the head coach and not Coach Paulson. That's how popular he is down in that area. Really, really talented at his job. Was a McDonald's All-American in high school and high-level college player, and played professionally overseas. And he was a point guard. Being able to spend time and learn about what it is to be a point guard and the kind of read you have and the way to play that position. If I hadn't spent time really dialing in at ops, I never would have gone to George Mason and met Simp and that whole staff. That staff's incredible. You got Simp's been there now for as long as Dave has, and is really the voice of that staff because he's the most tenured. The other two guys are head coaches. Aaron Kelly's the head coach at his alma mater, Catholic, and Dane Fisher's the head coach at William and Mary. And everything I learned from those three are going to take me to success levels down here at Commerce I never would have had. I wouldn't be able to talk about guard play the way I can now without Simp and without Fish. And AK dealt with our bigs, and I get to help out with our bigs a lot here at Commerce just because I felt comfortable enough to take them. If I was coaching here at 26, I don't think I would have just stepped on the floor and just pulled a set of positions without being told to and just gone and put them through a workout. So that picture definitely gives you that idea. One of the best things about working at Mason was that you got a lot of pictures like that. I haven't been at Division II. You don't always get a good photographer like that, but it was really cool climbing up the ladder and going into the A10 and starting to get to George Mason went to the Final Four. We all remember that 2006 team and being associated with that kind of program and then the people that are in there and the Atlantic 10. I mean, I grew up watching St. Joe's and LaSalle, and Temple was in the A10 when I grew up. Like, to be involved with that level of basketball at 28, 29, and 30 is something I never thought would happen. So, but Simp, that relationship, Dwayne Simpkins, I talk to Dwayne at least once a month, and his son is a freshman at DeMatha now and going through everything he went through, and just been great. Now we're talking about recruiting. Our conversation's a little bit different as I need some strategies, and he's one of many people who are there to have those conversations and help me through it.
Talk a little bit about your relationship with the players. So now, you're an assistant coach. You're at a high level, Division II top 20 program. Even though you were the director of ops at Mason and at some of these other schools, I'm sure you still had relationships with the players. And Frank, if you don't mind pulling another picture, like, here's an example of a guy I used to love watching highlights of when you were there, and clips of, because I know how talented he is as a player. But talk about your relationship with him and maybe some of the other guys that you developed, over the years.
For sure. No. So, if you're going to be any good at ops, you're going to have to have relationships with those guys, because guys need to show up on time. And Dave Paulson really valued making sure guys did things the right way on their own, in the sense of, we're not going to have to run and go get them out of the dorm and get them to practice. He wants them to have to do that on their own so that they're ready to be adults. And they all want to be professional basketball players. And when you go pro, you can't do that stuff. They just fine you or they cut you. But the reality is, if it's the same kid showing up, well, coach is still going to come into your office and be like, what are you doing to prevent this from happening? Mm-hmm. And the only way you can have any success with that is with the relationship with the guys. The guys in that picture, you remember Bryson, he played basketball at Bucknell. He's like a top 75 three-point shooter in the last 25 years of Division I. He graduated Bucknell a year after we graduated from Penn. I learned a lot from him in terms of how to manage player relationships, because he was a college basketball player. While we were both student athletes, he was a high-level student athlete, and he played basketball and could relate to those guys a lot differently. And by sitting back and just watching him do it, I learned a lot. And year 2 and year 3 was able to really cultivate relationships with those guys. And then Tyler Jorns, the guy on the left, he was a video coordinator for the Utah Jazz, had worked at George Mason as well. So he's dealt with even higher level not student athletes. I mean, they were athletes with the Jazz, obviously, outside of college, and learning from him on how they handle those situations with guys who didn't show up to community service, or the guys who were bouncing back and forth off 10-day contracts. Like, that was invaluable to then be able to apply it to our guys. I think with our players, though, it just comes down to, do you care about them? And if you care about them, then you'll have a good relationship. And guys know if you care about them. If you don't know their names, or you only know them by their nicknames, and you don't ask them about their families and what they're doing outside of basketball, they quickly know that you're just talking to them because you have to. And I felt strongly about always having relationships with those guys. And everywhere I've been, I've tried to continue to talk with the guys who are on those rosters after I've left, even if it's just once or twice a year. And the Mason guys are no different. I talk to those guys still, and I think they're going to have a great year. I'm excited to follow them. But that's kind of how I've approached player relationships as the ops guy. An assistant, a little bit different. I did it before at U Sciences and at Haverford, and I'm relearning that now. I'm dealing with a different kind of student athlete here at Commerce than I have at Sciences. Sciences was a very academic base. It's very basically the Ivy League of Division II. And we didn't have to worry about sitting on guys academically. Here, you're an academic support guy, and your best player might be a guy who struggles in the classroom. Well, if you're in charge of mentoring him, are you going to hold him accountable when he doesn't show up to a study hall or he's not doing great in the classroom? And dealing with that has been a great lesson to learn, because you're not going to always get to deal with guys who care a lot about the classroom all of the time, but you have to find a way to motivate them. And again, learning how to do that. My boss here is great at it, and the coworkers I have here are great at it because they've been doing it for a while. It's something that I'm learning how to do, and I think will ultimately strengthen player relationships as the year goes along.
Teddy, what are some things that you do to maintain relationships with maybe guys that you might have coached or worked with or mentored years ago? I think it's obvious that, being how much you care and how excited you are to start coaching and working with and taking over a program with one of your best friends, it's obvious how you kind of connect with your players and build relationships there. But what about guys you haven't talked to in a while? What's maybe a piece of advice you can give to someone who, is looking to maintain those relationships and stay connected with some of the people that they've mentored in the past?
You hit on it earlier, Corey. I mean, I think you and we talk a decent amount. I think one of the ways we always can initiate a conversation is through social media. And as a coach, a lot of people, get upset about the phone and how much kids are on it now. But as a coach, if you just think outside the box a little bit, it's the easiest way to help you initiate and maintain relationships, because guys are always on their phones. So if you can just be aware of the apps that your players are using, and they don't need to follow you as long as you can follow them, as long as their account's open for you to see, they're giving you a window of what they want you to see. And so reach out to those guys about that. And when you're 18 to 22 years old, that really matters to you. But I mean, my girlfriend just turned 30 over the weekend, and I put up a picture of our celebration. Well, when somebody reaches out and is like, "Hey, looks like you're having a great time," that feels good. It's like, oh, somebody noticed me. So it's the same thing with guys who have been with you. That's what I've tried to do. Is I follow a lot of my friends and a lot of old players that I coached or just was the ops guy for, and I follow them there, and I'll initiate interaction that way. The other reality is, I think people really want to maintain relationships. I think people don't always know how to. And if you want to have a relationship with somebody, then the task is for you to initiate. And if you're willing to just initiate and just send a text and say hi or what's going on, most people are like, "Why are you reaching out to me?" And if you're just like, "Hey, I'm just calling to say what's up. I saw you went to Europe last month. It looked like it was awesome. What was that like?" All of a sudden, you just start having a conversation, and then it will just end. And then if you make a note to follow up with that person in a few months, all of a sudden you're continuing to talk to that person and you feel like you have a genuine relationship. That's how I've always approached it. And I mean, fortunately for me, I feel like I've maintained contact with a lot of people, and I do it solely for myself. Again, I touch back to what we talked about earlier. There's a lot of people who have been really, really good to me. And I want people to know that if you've been good to me, I'm not going to forget you. And
Right.
I want to stay in touch with you because of that. That's kind of been my approach.
Awesome. Great advice. And, I think that carries over to all different aspects of life. It's not just about, coaching or recruiting. I do, since we have about 6 minutes left here, I do want to dive into a little bit of an interesting topic that we like to talk about on our show as it relates to the lacrosse world, but I want to talk about it from your perspective in the basketball world. And I think what happens a lot of time now in the lacrosse world, being that kids are starting to get recruited and they're starting to evaluate where they fit and, what type of school they should go to. Am I D1 player or am I, or am I a better fit to play Division II or III? When we approach the process, we always tell kids to drop the D's because it's really about finding the best fit for you in so many different ways, and I'm sure you understand that. I guess my question for you is, being in the Lone Star Conference, which I love the name, one of the more competitive conferences in Division II basketball. Are there guys in your league that could have played or can play Division I or even potentially will get drafted and play pro? Because I think the misconception in the lacrosse world is like, oh, if you play Division II or III, you're not as competitive, you're not as good. That's why you're there. I'm just curious what your kind of perspective is on that in the basketball world.
Oh, absolutely. Our league, I mean, specific to basketball, the Lone Star is the ACC at Division II. I mean, our conference has had a Final Four team for the last 5 years in it. A lot of people can say what they want to say, but fortunately for us, we can back that up, and our league is able to do that because we get elite players in it. I mean, if you look back, Shaw isn't in our league. It's a North Carolina school, but they had a kid named Amir Hinton who's from Philadelphia, and he was. I mean, I don't know if he actually got drafted, but he was going. They were talking about him being a top 40 draft pick because of how well he played. Amir ended up at Division II. He didn't start at Shaw, but ended up at Division II basically because he couldn't play Division I for a couple of different reasons. I wasn't involved in his recruitment process, but I know how that stuff works. And there are a lot of guys at the Division II level that can't play Division I because they either didn't get seen. Basketball recruitment's really different than lacrosse. For Division I schools, they only have 3 weekends in the summer and then limited opportunities during the high school season. So if you're not playing on the right AAU team, you just don't get seen. Well, just because you don't get seen doesn't mean you can't play. And then there's a whole world, the junior college world, where guys who don't get seen go and play, and then they get seen, and all of a sudden they end up at a high major school that no one ever knew of 2 years ago. Division II is littered with players like that. So you're going to be looking at really, really high level guys. Our league has a couple mid-major transfers. Our team itself has an Ohio State transfer on it, has a New Mexico State transfer on it, has a transfer from Loyola, Maryland on it. So we have a transfer from UTEP. So you're talking about really, really talented Division I guys who, for a variety of reasons, aren't there. And they end up Commerce for what you talked about, Corey. It's the best fit. I mean, that's just the reality. And if you want to go somewhere and you want to win a national championship, well, going to a low major Division I school isn't going to get that done for you. But going to a high level Division II school does. I think that's just one example of why Division II kind of makes sense for people, no matter what sport you're really in.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of I was talking to a coach who's a junior college coach in lacrosse the other day. He's like, we're never anyone's first choice. He's like, but that doesn't mean it's not someone's, not the best choice for them. It's just circumstance. Sometimes they're moving home because of family. Sometimes it's grade based. Sometimes, it could be an injury. And there's all these different reasons why people end up where they do. But no, they always, the kids who are really passionate about the game, like you're talking about, someone who loves playing hoops, someone who loves playing lacrosse, who just wants to continue to play and get better, like they always end up getting seen because they eventually get in the path of traffic when the time is right, and they play long enough and work hard enough so people hear about them. We have 2 minutes here, Teddy. We always like to kind of like leave the show just leaving like one piece of advice if someone were to tune in and hear from you about how they can build relationships and maybe or maybe just talk about how to be successful in the world of sports. A lot of kids now, which is pretty cool, they can go into college with an opportunity to study it, have a major in sports marketing or management or analytics, and like there's so many different avenues kids can take to stay involved in sports from the get-go. I guess for you, like what's one piece of advice you'd give kind of a kid like that, a boy or a girl that wants to kind of get in the world of sports and they're, let's say only in high school or just getting into college?
My biggest piece of advice is to not have a backup plan. You are going to go into sports and for a long period of time not make any real money. It's going to be really, really hard. Whether you're like yourself, Corey, where you're trying to get something completely off the ground, or you're just trying to, I want to be an athletic director and I'm running facilities right now, or I'm an assistant compliance intern. It's going to be a long time where you're not making any money. And if you can just come to grips with that early and not have a backup plan, not have well, if I'm 28 and I'm still here making X amount of dollars, I'm going to get out. I think if you can avoid those situations, you can have a long career in this. That would be my biggest piece of advice.
Awesome. Thank you, Teddy. I appreciate it. And thank you so much for taking the time to come on. You're amazing. And where can we follow your program if someone wants to become a fan of where you're at Commerce and kind of know what you're up to as the season starts, and anything exciting too coming up, being that the season's around the corner?
Season's around the corner, man. We're on, I mean, obviously on Twitter at Lion_MBB, and then we stream all our games through the Lone Star website. So just the Lone Star Conference with a quick Google, you can find our stuff there. And obviously our school website, all those are great means. And hopefully we make a deep enough run where you'll find us on Sports Center, something like that. And well, we're excited. It should be a fun year for sure.
Cool. And we could talk all night, Teddy. You know that. Coach Wink,
I know,
any last
man.
words to our boy Teddy?
Teddy, thank you for coming on, man. It's great to see your success. You know how proud I am of you.
I appreciate that. No, there's over I guess my left shoulder. That's our senior year gift, Corey, from your parents. That's senior year 2011, and that's our senior year team up there. So Penn's always had a big place in my heart. You guys are some of my favorites, and I really appreciate you having me on tonight. Thank you so much.
Take care,
Thanks,
buddy.
Teddy. Have a great night.
See you guys.